When it comes to the history of gaming, the Game Boy is one of the most important consoles in history. True handheld gaming had simply never really been done prior to this. Sure, we had the Game & Watch style 3-frame LCD games, but do those even really count as video games? Still, all great things must eventually come to an end, and even an icon like the Game Boy will eventually be replaced by something more advanced. Like the Game Boy Advance. I'll admit, I am highly biased and nostalgic for this era, but gosh dang do games on the GBA still look great to this day. And few were more mind-blowing to little Landon than Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Going from Gens 1 and 2, as I have been playing, to Gen 3 was like getting home after a long day. Everything about these games is incredible. Breathtaking visuals, a bigger story, iconic characters, and even more iconic Pokemon. These games are my favorite in the series. Not necessarily the best if we're discussing objective game rankings, but they certainly have my heart. However, they presented Game Freak with a bit of a problem. The last time Pokemon made a sequel, they added in methods of moving Pokemon from Gen 1 to Gen 2. But with Gen 3 on a totally new console, there wasn't really a good way of connecting them to what came before. Which means people would have to say goodbye to their treasured partners, and more so, how would they ever complete the Pokedex? This problem gets worse when you add in the fact that Game Freak initially intended Ruby and Sapphire to be reboots for the franchise, and they weren't going to feature any old Pokemon in them originally. This changed late into development, as they realized they hadn't finished enough new Pokemon to allow a good variety of types. So they ended up backfilling the Pokedex with some Kanto and Johto mods. Even if you did have the ability to trade between the two games though, only having Ruby and Sapphire will cause your dex to top out at about 206 Pokemon, out of a total of 386. This is of course assuming that I did my math right. With approximately 180 Pokemon left out in the cold, what was the Pokemon Company to do? The biggest and most obvious fix was Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, which returned the series to Kanto and the many Pokemon those games had to offer. But they didn't get everything. In order to fully cover their bases, Game Freak needed a way to inject a decent number of Johto Pokemon into the available Pokemon pool. And they find a way to do this with Pokemon Colosseum for the Nintendo GameCube. One other problem Pokemon had is the same one that I've been talking about for the past 2 weeks now. People always want the ability to play with their Pokemon in the best graphics available. And while the GBA provided the best looking mainline games the series had seen to this point, people still yearn for the additional polygons. Continuing the trend they had started, Pokemon Colosseum was created as Gen 3's 3D battle simulator. Except this wasn't made entirely in-house by Game Freak. The previous two titles were made by Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Team, also known as EAD. Pokemon Colosseum was developed by Genius Sonority, a team of developers hand-picked by Nintendo with the express purpose to make Pokemon games. In addition to this one, they also made Pokemon Troze, Shuffle, Cafe Mix, and the two other games that we haven't covered quite yet. Nintendo spent about $1 million poaching talent, largely from Sony, and they put Manabu Yamana at the head of their new team. If you're a fan of Dragon Quest, you might know him, as Yamana worked on Dragon Quest 1 through 7, initially as a programmer, but would move up to the director of programming on the later titles. On paper, Yamana and the new Genius Sonority team were the perfect people to create a new Pokemon title. Except for the fact that not a single one of them had ever actually played a Pokemon game. They knew absolutely nothing about the franchise, and as a result, weren't all that worried about making a game that fit the standard Pokemon adventure story. They wanted to explore a slightly more mature theme. They wanted to set the game in a place unlike anything the Pokemon world had seen before, and they wanted to make something totally original. I tell you all of this to prep you. Pokemon Colosseum is something of a dark horse for the franchise. Much like with the other two 3D battle simulators, all the game really needed to be was a way to see all of the Pokemon battle in 3D. Anything on top of that is just icing on the cake. I know when I first played the game as a little child, I thought it'd be Stadium 3. I mean, after all, Stadium and Colosseum, those are just synonyms for one another. I figured I would see a new Gym Leader Castle with Hoenn Gym Leaders, mini games featuring Hoenn Pokemon, maybe even some new cool battle modes like the Little Cup. What I ended up with is one of the most radically unique Pokemon games in the entire franchise, as this game is actually its own self-contained Pokemon RPG. Listen, you can just boot up the game and start battling with the Pokemon on your GBA games. However, why would you want to do that when this anime edgelord is practically begging you to hit new game? And you're gonna want to do that because immediately after naming your character, you're presented with a cutscene where a massive explosion takes out a building. That's one way to set a tone. Pokemon fans at this point in time are used to games starting with a monologue from a professor and opening on a child's bedroom. Pokemon Colosseum starts off with an act of what we will come to understand is extremely violent gang warfare. Through the smoke and fire, our character, wearing cool reflective sunglasses goggles, will grab this cool device and run away with his Umbreon from a horde of angry Lobots from Star Wars and a man who appears to be twice the size of any ordinary human, before escaping on the most ridiculous sci-fi motorbike in history and then detonating a second bomb. Gosh dang, do they know how to set a mood for a game. The create something brand new to the Pokemon world vibe the developers were going for is clear from the start, and I don't just mean in the story explained thus far. You can see it in the designs of the characters and environment. Kanto and Johto had fairly common environments, largely taking place in temperate grasslands or forests. Hoenn pushed the boundaries a bit more with some jungle environments, but Ore, the region this game takes place in, is a harsh desert. And instead of the modern buildings and towns we're used to, Colosseum starts out by putting us next to a run-down old gas station diner built out of an old train. I should also mention our protagonist. I already mentioned that they went full early 2000s edgy anime character, what with his sick bike and mirrored shades that are also goggles, but look at the entirety of his design. He's clearly older than your average protagonist, and his arm thing, which we'll explain what that is in just a minute, really stands out. Kind of reminds me of the Dark Magician and other Kazuki Takahashi art for spellcasters, but that's probably just my inner weeb coming out a bit too much. While we are at the diner, we see a news report saying the building we bombed was actually the base of a criminal organization named Team Snag'em. So, I guess our act of violence was at least a little justified. We also get in a battle with this guy named Ryder Willie. Do with that name what you will. And we get to see some of the core features of what our adventure in the Ore region will contain. First and foremost is the format. Every single battle in this game is a double battle, from the very first one to the very last boss. If you're only a layman to Pokemon battling, that might not seem like a big deal, but there's a reason the competitive format uses double battles. Everything about normal battling changes. I'm not a competitive battler by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I think I could probably do pretty well in like a local league amongst friends, but I barely understand what people are doing on the high levels. And for someone like me, who plays Pokemon almost religiously, Colosseum's double battle only system is hard. I'll mention specific moments as they come up, but I did get KO'd more than once. For someone with only a casual level of knowledge of the game, Colosseum will seem incredibly difficult. This game has a reputation as being one of the most difficult Pokemon games in history, and I think it deserves at least some of the hype around it. The second thing you'll notice about Colosseum is the starters. You don't get to pick them in the traditional way. Instead, you always start the game with Umbreon and Espeon, and they're a pretty interesting combo to start a game with. If you use both on your team, as I always want to do, you'll pretty quickly find that Umbreon is extremely tanky and Espeon is frail but hits like a freight train. They make for an interesting pair, and I think they promote strategic thinking even in the early game. Moving back to the plot, Ryder Willie suggests we check out the nearby city of Phoenix, Arizona. Panac City. We spend all of 2 seconds in the Oasis town before we have to battle a couple of thugs to save this girl from being kidnapped. She tells us that she saw those thugs using a quote, peculiar Pokemon, and that's why they nabbed her. Now, I don't normally condone involving government officials in anyone's business, but the locals here all think we should go tell the mayor about this. So, I guess, when in Arizona, do as the Arizonans do. Also, this girl will follow us for the entire rest of the game. She'll be pretty important as we see in a bit, but for now, just know that she will be stapled to you until the very end, even if she does make moving backwards occasionally extremely annoying. Hey, free girlfriend though. We have a brief interaction with Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII before we get to talk to kindly old Mayor Escade, who promises to launch an investigation and tells us to go check out the local stadium in the meantime. When we get there, we run into some Team Snag'em goons, who reveal that we used to be a member. Oh, what? Hey, I did say they're going a bit edgelord with this game, right? The more plot-relevant reveal here is that our sick arm armor is actually a device called a snag machine. Supposedly, Team Snag'em had a large-scale one of these, but we blew it up. And now the only one that exists is the small portable one strapped to our arm. Given the name, you might be able to put together what it does. It snags Pokemon, meaning it can break one of the cardinal rules of the Pokemon universe. A snag machine can catch Pokemon that belong to other trainers. What exactly was the long-term game plan for our character? Why did he hold on to the snag machine? I don't know, but at least we kept it out of the hands of some objectively nefarious individuals. After turning away Team Snag'em, we're told by our girlfriend to go buy Pokeballs. But even something as simple as that is actually a bit tricky in this game, as Ore doesn't have wild Pokemon, which also means they don't have a market for Pokeballs. Asking around gets us to the outskirts stage, where we can actually pick some up. But upon returning to Panac, we're told a bunch of rough customers have shown up and headed for the mayor's house, including those thugs from earlier. At the mayor's house, we meet the iconic Mirror B. We'll discuss him a bit more later, but for now, just know he looks like this. Fix that image in your mind. He sends his goons on us and blocks the exits to town to ensure our capture. One of the goons sends out a Makuhita, which our girlfriend reacts rather strongly to her. It has this dark aura and even takes a swing at us, the player. I really hope I don't have to connect the dots for you. This is a game with no wild Pokemon. We have a device that steals Pokemon from other people. There are a special subset of Pokemon that only we can see. Do you see where I'm going with this? Snagging the Makuhita wins us the battle, and the true mystery of the game begins to take shape. What is this dark Pokemon, and where did it come from? Before we leave Panac though, there is one thing I need to mention. Remember how I said this game doesn't have you pick a starter in the traditional way? You might have assumed, because of our Espeon and Umbreon, that we just don't get a starter in this game. But that's not entirely the case. Mirror B blockaded the town with 3 multicolored goons, and all of them have these shadowy Pokemon. And the specific Pokemon each one has is one of the middle stage Johto starters. Rare Pokemon in this era of the series. You can only catch one for now, as the other 2 goons will run off afterwards, so pick wisely. From here, our girlfriend suggests we head back to the town where she was kidnapped from to further investigate things, which takes us to Pyrite Town, which may have my single favorite city music in the entire franchise. Man, that's smooth. I'm not sure how many details of the plot I'm going to be able to cram into this video at this point, so just understand that there's a lot of connecting tissue between the points I am going to mention. In Pyrite Town, we learn that the dark Pokemon we've been capturing are called Shadow Pokemon, and in case it wasn't obvious, they're the only Pokemon available in this game. They are creatures who've had the doors to their hearts artificially closed, What sort of Kingdom Hearts science goes into that sort of thing is beyond me, but it effectively turns them into fighting machines. The Shadow Pokemon are predominantly Johto Pokemon, which, as we previously established, were largely impossible to get in the main series during this time period. The bad guys, called Team Cipher, are distributing these Pokemon to the criminal element in Pyrite Town as they build up their forces, and the Pyrite contingent is led by the illustrious Mirror B. I feel like this design alone should get across what kind of person he is. He also really likes using Ludicolo, as he has 4 of them in his boss fight, which is set to some of the most iconic music in the franchise. Oh yeah, he does have a Shadow Sudowoodo. Upon beating Mirror B and running him out of Pyrite Town, our next stop is Agate Village, home of our girlfriend's grandparents and the only green environment in this game. After saving a local relic from Cipher, we get the small tablet, an item that lets us tap into the power of the relic stone. I should probably take some time to mention how these Shadow Pokemon work. You see, all Shadow Pokemon will not gain any EXP, they will not level up, they will not evolve, and they will not even learn new moves via TM. They also, by default, only know the move Shadow Rush, a 90 base power, typeless physical attack that always does 1/16 of the Pokemon's maximum health in recoil damage. That's right, Pokemon Colosseum is a game where every single catchable Pokemon can kill itself with recoil damage, some of which can never be accessed again if you miss them. Why even bother using them? That is the obvious question. A, because as we've already mentioned, that's all that's available, and B, because Shadow Pokemon don't stay Shadow Pokemon, or at least they don't have to. Shadow Pokemon have this gauge under their HP bar, similar to the EXP meter, only this one counts down. There's a lot of methods for lowering this gauge, but the most basic one is just using the Pokemon in battle. There's also the daycare and cologne massages as viable options, but what is usually the most effective is Hyper Mode. Randomly, Shadow Pokemon will ignore doing the move you told them and get extra aggressive. It will randomly start disobeying orders if you use moves other than Shadow Rush, and will no longer take any items you try to use on it. But its critical hit rate with Shadow Rush will jump to a whopping 90%. As Colosseum doesn't have wild Pokemon, you don't have a run option. You do have Call, which can be used to break Hyper Mode, which usually drops a decent chunk off the meter, making it kind of a risk-reward scenario. What is the point of dropping the Shadow gauge though? Well, as it decreases, Shadow Pokemon will become more and more normal. They start relearning moves and even get access to their natures, which is normally suppressed by the Shadow. When you drop the gauge to 0, you can take that Pokemon to the Relic Stone, which has apparently been blessed with the power of Celebi, and they can use that power to undergo Purification, which reverts them back to normal. They'll even regain all of the XP they weren't getting prior. As there are 48 Shadow Pokemon, it'll be our job to catch and purify them all. One thing I've always wanted to know about this process is, what does Celebi actually have to do with it? The game never really explains, and you can't even really encounter Celebi. You get a very small number of Time Flutes in the game, which are items that can be used at the Relic Stone to call Celebi to you and instantly purify one Pokemon, which kind of implies that Celebi could just purify everything without us having to do the hard work. Why do you have this power? From here, you have a basic understanding of the plot of the game. Find Cipher, catch their Shadow Pokemon, and purify them to stop them from taking over the world. I'm not going to be able to give you a beat-for-beat breakdown of the whole game, but here are a few points that I feel are really necessary to hit. After Agate Village, we're sent to Mount Battle, an optional training facility, because Cipher is attacking it. Fighting our way through the goons they brought eventually puts us up against a 9-foot-tall super giant of a man named Dakim. He's like if AZ got shredded and really into organized crime. He's one of the admins for Cipher, and he proves his criminal bona fides by straight up decking a man. Decking is also worthy of note because he showcases the part of the reason this game is so hard beyond just the double battles. The bosses have actual strategies. Dakim's is fairly basic, though he does expand upon it in later rematches you have to do through the story. It's the classic Protect Earthquake combo. One Pokemon on his team will shield itself from harm, while the other hits you with one of the greatest moves in Pokemon history, which naturally hits both of your Pokemon because this is a double battle. And the cherry on top of the Dakim sundae is that his shadow Pokemon is a gosh dang Entei. One of the legendary beasts of Johto was captured, brought to Arizona, and turned evil. A little pro tip here is to make sure to double target his normal Pokemon after the Entei comes out. If you're going to try and capture him, you can't let Dakim kill it with his own Earthquake. Not long after Dakim, we find a secret entrance to the Under, which is one of my favorite locations, not only in this game, but in all of Pokemon. It's an entire town located below Pyrite Town, and it is entirely controlled by Cipher. I really love this place because it's not a hideout, it's a town. We normally don't encounter NPCs in Pokemon games who are remotely interested in the evil team's plan, but here we have a whole town of them. It's such an interesting switch up to the normal plot of a Pokemon game, as it puts us on the back foot, hated by the people instead of generally seen as a positive influence, even if we are still objectively the good guy here. We even team up with a resistance cell, though they are literally just children. The Under is run by Venus, another Cipher admin who loves moves that eat up your turns, like Attract, and in later battles, Thunder Wave, Confuse Ray, and Stun Spore. And she has a Suicune, marking the second legendary beast. Oh yeah, we also see that Cipher is run by that Sephiroth character from earlier, in case you somehow didn't put that together. His name is Landon-Core. After running her out of town, we manage to get access to a subway that takes us to the Shadow Lab, where we can discover where they made the Shadow Pokemon. But first, a pair of goons detonate another bomb. This is the third explosion in this game. With creepy empty kennels filled with discarded DNA samples, this place certainly paints a picture of Cipher's character, and is run by their chief scientist, Ein, who really loves pairing moves like Confuse Ray with moves like Toxic, because he's basically the Pokemon equivalent of Mengele. Also, he's got a Raikou because we need to complete the trio. The final hurdle for the main story is the Real Gem Tower. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure where this giant casino/battle stadium fits into Cipher's world domination plan, but it is one heck of a gauntlet. In addition to several ordinary peons, we have to rematch all of the admins with improved teams. It is so weird seeing Mir B use anything other than Ludicolo. Then, we have to fight Gonzap, the leader of Team Snag'em, the guys we blew up at the beginning of the game. Turns out, he had struck a deal with Cipher before the game began, and most of the Pokemon that were turned into Shadow Pokemon had actually been acquired by Team Snag'em. He loves super high attack stats. This fight isn't over because then we have to fight another gauntlet of random goons back to back, kind of like the Elite Four, only unlike the Elite Four, we don't get to heal between battles. Only upon beating all of these do we get to fight Landon-Core, who not only has a regularly stacked team, but also has a Shadow Metagross, complete with a super low catch rate. I actually did manage to catch it, but I still lost the battle. My second fight went way better, and I was able to take him down, partially because he replaced the Metagross with a much easier to defeat Alakazam. You'd think beating Landon-Core would mean the end, but wait, there's more, because this game wants to try and kick in your teeth just one more time before the credits roll. Landon-Core reveals that he was just the face of Cipher, and the real mastermind was kindly old Mayor Escade from Fenax City, who does this crazy transformation sequence to reveal his true identity as Evice, and now we have to battle him, and he has one of the most disgusting teams I've ever seen. Swords Dance and Baton Pass on Scizor, Dragon Dance on Salamence, Earthquake on Machamp with Guts to pair with Salamence. At one point, he managed to use Skill Swap on his own Slaking. I have scarcely been more terrified during a Pokemon battle in my entire life. Pair all of this with a somewhat ridiculous amount of healing items and even battle boosters like X-Attack for the Pokemon that can't set up, and he is devastatingly effective. The cherry on top of this sundae of death is his shadow Pokemon, Tyranitar, which will summon Permanent Sandstorm once it hits the field. Of all of his Pokemon, this is actually probably the least scary, assuming you saved your Master Ball, which I did. Do not waste your Master Ball on anything else. When you beat Evice, he will try to escape via a helicopter, but then Ho-Oh will appear and use Sacred Fire to blow it up. That's 4 separate detonations in this game. Jeez Louise. Evice is taken into custody and the world is saved. It's finally over. Well, not quite over. I legitimately forgot how much post-game Colosseum has. Just to give you an idea, I record in roughly 1 hour chunks, and chunk 14 was me beating the game. But I stopped recording after chunk 22, and I didn't even do everything this game has to offer. For starters, there's the issue of purifying all of the shadow Pokemon that you've captured. Once the main game has been completed, you do unlock the ability to trade with GBA games, meaning you can offload what you've captured. There's also the Mount Battle Challenge. It's a 100-man climb up the mountain, and there's 2 versions of this, one in story and one in battle mode, accessed from the main menu. While both are challenging, the battle mode version is extremely difficult, as the levels will match your highest leveled Pokemon, and the endgame routinely uses legendary Pokemon on top of that. Beating that after purifying all 48 shadow Pokemon will net you a special gift Ho-Oh. However, I don't have all of the shadow Pokemon. Assuming you caught every single Pokemon in the playthrough, you'll only be at 42 shadow Pokemon. The others are found in post-game quests. The first of note are the 2 Johto starters that you didn't catch. You'll be sent an email about a suspicious-looking Pokemon being spotted in Pyrite, and after a bit of detective work, eventually you track it down to the Snag'em hideout, the one we blew up at the beginning of the game, and we catch it from the Cipher Peon there. A second email will send us on another hunt to find the 3rd starter, ending in that Peon being tracked down to the Cipher Lab. Yet another email will have you finding a Shadow Smeargle and Ursaring in the hands of some Snag'em grunts, one of which is named Biden. Are Joe Biden jokes still relevant in 2026? If you challenge Gonzap again, not only will you have to contend with his Hyper Beam obsessed team, you'll finally be able to send him into hiding, and you'll also be able to pick up the D-Disc. You see, there's this UFO thing in the Under, which takes different discs to move around, and the D-Disc causes the UFO to descend into the depths for one of the ultimate challenges in this game, the Deep Colosseum. Not only are the Pokemon here super tough, you'll have to beat it 5 times in a row. At the end of each 4-man challenge, you'll fight one of these Cipher admins who will have even more powerful teams. But that 5th time, the battle will be against Deep King Agnol and his shadow, Shuckle. His team is all about strong defense, as all of his Pokemon have very few or even no weaknesses. But he's honestly not too scary at this point in the game, even if he is the trainer with the highest level Pokemon in the story mode. His Kingdra is a serious threat, but if you can get to him in the first place, you can probably take him. After defeating Agnol, the last mystery questline will start when you get emails accusing you of attacking people with a shadow Pokemon. When investigating this rumor, I found Trudley and Folly, the mere bee grunts from the beginning of the game, hanging out in the old mayor's house. I honestly don't know if that's related, but I thought I'd mention it here. Eventually, a TV news report will bring us to the outskirts stand, where an imposter version of us is there to battle. They gave me the trainer class, shady guy Lando. I'm not that shady. This guy has a pretty stacked team and all, including both Gyarados and Milotic in the high 60s. So, why is his shadow Pokemon a level 20 Togetic? I brought one of my weakest Pokemon and I still feared killing it. However, with that snagged, Cipher's shadow Pokemon plot is finally defeated. Oh yeah, the imposter was just a Cipher grunt in disguise. Luckily, a newscaster is nearby to save our reputation. That's really it for Colosseum. I have nothing but appreciation for this game. It really pushes the boundaries of the Pokemon world. And honestly, it's kind of a shame that the main Pokemon company so often ignores it. The closest we've gotten to them even mentioning this game coming back are the shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Still, the main game is definitely a challenge, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't played, especially if you're bored with the difficulty level of regular Pokemon games. My one gripe with the game is how much of a focus the Johto Pokemon got. I understand that was kind of the point of the game to begin with, but I really wanted to see more Gen 3 Pokemon in 3D, as that's my favorite generation. The NPCs have a decent variety, I will give them that, but there are only 6 Shadow Pokemon that are Gen 3. I mean, can you give me something, really? Oh well, maybe there'll be more next week when we cover this game's direct sequel, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. See you then. Be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.